Easy guys, how's it going? It's OSCO here. Yeah, just wanted to say before we get into this video that this was originally a 10 quick tips for mixing, but what I didn't realise was this little series of clips that I recorded was going to go into like the hour mark. I thought it'd just be a little bit easier for you guys to watch in like two 20-minute videos rather than having to watch them in one go. So what I'm going to do is release this in a two-part series, so 5 tips each. One will be released when you see this one, and then the next one will be released next week. So that being said, enjoy the video, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Peace. Easy guys, how's it going? It's OSCO here, back with another video. So, before I get started, been writing down all your ideas for future videos, so if you've got any more ideas for any future videos, please leave them in the comments down below. It's helping me out massively in terms of like structuring like how I want to move this channel forward. You know, if you want something answering and you can't find it out there, maybe I can answer it for you. So, saying that, this video, we're going to be covering 10 quick mixing tips. If you want to see more content like this, like top 10s and things like that, we can do top 10 sound design tips, top 10 mixing tips, top 10 mastering tips. We can do it all. If you want to see more content like that, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment saying that you want to see this content. With that, let's get on with the video. Let's just jump over to the live scene here. First trick is how to add more punch or more weight to your kick. So the way that I do this is with a multi-band compressor and using preamp. So right now my preamp is set up so that it is making the kick have more weight, and it's just with compression. We're not boosting anything, we're just giving it a little bit more presence in the low end due to our attack and release times. With the first one, what we're doing is we're reducing the initial like hit of the kick. So normally where your kick will sort of punch through in the mix is between 200 hertz and 80, give or take. So like that's where like, you know, the big like knock of the kick is. If I solo this band, you'll be able to see what I mean. If I pull the attack up so it hardly interacts with the compressor, then you can hear that that's where like the transient, I guess, like the low mid transient of the kick is. That bit. And then if we solo the low end, that's like the weight of the kick. Now, we can add weight by bringing the attack right down on the compressor so it clamps down on that transient. So you can hear that. If I pull that back and play it all the way down, it sort of muffles it. So we'll muffle that and then have a listen to the low end. So we want that to come through pretty quickly. So to add more weight to the kick, we'll release the attack. If I pull it down, you can hear that that's not got as much presence because it's clamping down on that lower frequencies. So we'll set it to like a medium, maybe a slow attack, and then on this one, okay. So let's give that a listen. Maybe I'll back that off a little bit. So let's listen to it without. Maybe give it a little less. So you can hear it's got a little bit more body to this kick now. What I would probably do is just give it a bit more emphasis, is to boost it by a few dB. And that way we're bringing up the low end of the kick and making it more weighty. And then vice versa, what we can do is give it a long attack on here, give this a short attack, and then what we're doing now as well is because we're reducing the gain of the kick by 6 dB, we might want to give it a boost to gains to level it. So like, yeah, basically what we're doing here is just getting rid of that low end now and giving this a bit of a boost. And what we could also do to add that knock to the kick is, rather than compress, use an expand mode and give it a boost by a couple dB. Bring the attack down. And then what we might want to do after that is EQ out anything that's rumbly in that low end. In the mid, sorry. So like, I really don't like 200 hertz in a kick. And right here, we're pretty much boosting it bang on 200. But everything around 200 is kind of what we want to bring up in that transient. So you can hear that that's just got like, you know, that's going to hit a lot harder when it's loud. And it will probably fit a lot better with the bass as well now. So if I solo my bass group as well. Listen to it in context. I know, I think it just pops out in the mix a little bit more. That's mixing tip number 1, make your kicks more punchy. So, mix tip number 2. We're going to make our snares more snappy and transient and just cut through the mix a little bit better. So, you've got to think about where a snare sits in, you know, in the frequency spectrum. Our ears as humans, we are more sensitive to picking up frequencies at 1K, 3K, 5K, and I think like, I don't know, 500. There's a few frequencies where we're really reactive to. And snares sit perfectly in like that human speech sort of category, and like the, you know, where baby's crying sort of frequency around like 3 to 5K, like it covers that spectrum. So we want to sort of emphasize that, because when it cuts through, we want the snare to be loud. That's basically holding the rhythm in the track. We have the kick, and then it's followed by a snare. It's something that we're going to expect. Let's go back and listen to this track, just the drums. So what I'll use to emphasize those frequencies is a multiband transient shaper like Spiff. Let's turn that back on, give it a boost around 3K. And there's also a bit of low end in there, and that's part of the sound because it's a trap snare, so we'll give that a little bit of a boost as well. Okay, so now that we've got those coming through, what I might do is add a bit of sharpness and up the sensitivity. And I'm going to take the decay down. So what that's doing is it's shaping the front end of that sound. So like when it first hits, and what the purple line is, you know, the purple section in the middle here, when that pumps up and comes down, that's like displaying where it's boosting the volume and then how slowly it's coming down. Basically, I'm just boosting that initial hit of the signal, and I don't want it to linger too long because I just want the snap there. And then what I'll do is, in combination with this, is I will use Pro Q3. And with the Pro Q3, I will take one of the frequencies. Like, it depends on whether if I'm designing the snare from scratch. Because this is a mixing tip, we'll do this the quick way. And then maybe in a stream or something, I'll show you the longer way that I like to do it. But basically, you just want to take that and give it a boost. Because we're already boosting around 3K, we'll do like somewhere in the air band of the snare. So maybe we'll go like 10K and give it some tops. Make it quite wide on the Q. Maybe go a bit higher, like 9 dB. And give that a listen. And that's really bright now. So by doing this, we're increasing the loudness. So you might want to back that off a little bit now. All right. And then we'll give that a listen. So yeah, you can hear there, I just quickly turned it on and off. The snare's definitely more present now. The low end isn't so intense because we've turned that down a little bit. It's a little bit more intelligible. I don't know, it's just, that's what you're trying to do in a mix anyways. You're trying to make things stand out a little bit more. Sort of reduce the bits of the sound that you don't want being so forward. Because if you just took the snare and turned it up, it's going to be louder, but the wrong parts are going to be louder. And that's what the multiband transient shaping does, and the EQ does as well. So that's mix tip number 2, make your snares snappier and more present. All right, mix tip number 3. Now we're going to talk about controlling your low end. So this is something that I use a lot, and I've kind of brushed over in other videos, but I just want to sort of go into this again because it's really important in terms of the way that I mix down multiple basses. So right now we've got 2 808s here, and they're in a group, and on that group I want to control both the 808s. So, you know, maybe there's going to be certain notes that ones are hitting where it's louder or quieter, and normally, little like quick tip is the higher your bass line goes, you're going to want to reduce the volume of it because it is perceived louder, because there's a lot of low end energy in sub-harmonic, you know, in sub basses. So when it comes up into a more audible frequency, you're going to want to reduce that. Yeah, quick tip over. Now with the basses, we want to control those basses. You want to control those fundamentals, because when you have a project with multiple basses, you don't want, maybe you do want a little bit of dynamics between each one, depending on the genre of music, but usually we want a more balanced and controlled sound in the majority of cases. So we see that here. So these notes all seem pretty controlled, but just to be safe, what we're going to do is just a simple low compressor, because what we don't want to do is compress the signal entirely and then bring up or you know, reduce the dynamics. So basically we're bringing that the low end and the high end to a closer level. We want to leave the high end of the bass and like the, you know, the overtones as they are, and to taper off in the way that we want them to, and then just control that low harmonic. And what I like to do, because Pro MB, for some reason the default settings are great on it, is set the range to -6, and then I just like to tweak the threshold until it's doing about 3 dB of gain reduction, and I find that just sort of glues the low end together. So if you've got multiple basses doing different notes, so like let's give this one another 1.5 dB so that they are unbalanced. And you can hear that now. Usually when you're creating songs and you're processing basses, some basses turn out more desirable than others, and like you don't need to tweak them as much, and you're not going so crazy on the processing. It's just sort of a little filler, and it's fine. But then, you know, you've got another sound where you're going crazy on the processing and you tend to forget that the volume is rising. And this is just a good fail-safe. If it's drastically louder, you'll hear it. You'll hear the compression working too hard. But in general, this will sort of be like your lazy man's mixing low end, like safety net. And I use this tip in all of my tracks. So yeah, that's controlling your low end. All right, guys, this one still on low end. This is one that I get a lot, and this is stereo bass processing. So how do you get a stereo bass and keep it mono compatible? You know, so that when you go from playing it, you know, on your headphones or, you know, on your speakers, and then going and playing it out, how do you stop the loss of information? There's a rack here. I don't use this on every track, but I use the same principle in every track. So I'll create an audio effect rack. One chain is totally dry. So basically the signal that I'm putting into it is as mono as it can get. So straight out of the synth. In this case, it's samples, but you know, normally I'll be using a synth. The synth will be playing, you know, will go out as mono as possible. And then I'll have a separate send for stereo work. So the stereo information, let's jump into it. Normally what I do to start off with, before I go into any stereo processing, is I'll high pass somewhere between 100 and 200 hertz. And you sort of do it by ear. You know, I'll either use a 24 dB per octave curve or a 36, depending. I'll put this on linear phase mode. If you're not using Pro Q3, you can get away with it. If you're using EQ8, I'd oversample it if you can. Like to use linear phase mode, and then I think my sweet spot normally is about 130-ish, because it's important to have that low mid information in there, and having that nice and wide really creates you know, like this like humming effect around it, like for your headphone users. What I will do is add a little bit of distortion, and so here I'm just banding out a little bit here to stop the distortion from going too high. So if I turn these off, so let's listen to this band for the first. So we'll sort of go there. Maybe what I'll do is I'll pull it back to 100 because it's tapering off. Yeah, we'll say there. We'll turn on decapitator, just to add a bit of harmonic content in there. So turn that off. And obviously increase the level. With this Pro Q, we're just taking off that top end. Maybe we can even come a bit lower than that. And what I might do as well is take that Pro Q, put it on the end, and then turn that off. And now, with the multipass, I have a stereo widening preset on there. I'll just make this a bit smaller so you can see what's going on. A bit bigger now. Again. So we'll take this. And this is a preset within kilohertz, but you don't have to use this. You can... What I like to use sometimes is a delay. And what a delay will do, if we put this on here and turn multipass off. I also, just a quick thing as well, I get a lot of questions about how I get my Ableton to look like this. These are my settings in the customization section. So dark, brightness on 200, color intensity 100, color hue 210 degrees, and then let's have a look at this delay then. So I turn feedback down to 0, dry wet to 100%. I'll unlink these two and set them both to time. One will be on about 1%, and the other will be, I wouldn't go any higher than 20 milliseconds, but somewhere in between 10 and 20. Let's give that a listen. Turn that off. You can hear that's crazy wide. And that's kind of what we want for this. You know, so if I put them both on, it's with the multipass and the delay, it sort of gives this like really, really wide sound. And then I'll just take that and mix it in with the dry signal. So you can sort of hear that adds like this extra sense of space around the 808 and gives it this really nice sort of extra veneer or layer, which I think is quite appealing. With that, that's mono-compatible stereo bass. All right, tip number 5. If you're liking these tips so far, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and share this video with one of your friends. So yeah, tip number 5, soften your hats with saturation. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use a preamp to soften our hi-hat. So let's give it a listen without the preamp. What I find with hats is that sometimes they can be a little bit edgy. And what I mean by edgy is resonant and transient. And it tends to be the case with metal. You know, when you use a sample where someone's hitting a hi-hat, there's an impact and it's abrasive and it's inharmonic. With something impacting metal, it's quite a sharp sound and it helps it cut through the mix. But sometimes it's a little bit too much. And what I like to do to soften that is use saturation. And you might be thinking, well, why would distortion or saturation soften a sound? The way I like to think about it is that it takes the frequency content of that sound, and the loudest part of that sound is that spike that I'm not liking. And then by adding harmonics, we're evening that out and bringing up the level of adding harmonics to all the other parts of the sound, and was almost like treating it like compression. Saturation can almost work like compression in certain ways. I think that's why I've found that I like to do that. So if we give this a listen without any distortion and without any EQing, then we give it the full welly. Now that doesn't sound very appealing, but let's bounce back and forth and just really listen to the spike of that hat. It's totally softened when we turn that input gain to the max. What you want to do is get to the point where it's clearly distorted, and then dial it back to where it's just it's still got that characteristic of having that transient peak, but it's also still soft. And it's that's where you find the middle ground, by taking it too far and dialing it back. Now what I'm noticing is that the distortion is also adding a little bit of low end that I don't want. So what I'm going to do is just pull down at 250. Now let's listen to that with and without. So this is without. And then with. And then in context. That's without, and then with. It just sits there way nicer, in my opinion. That's tip number 5. Soften your hats with saturation.